Hmm. So this next question sort of like touches on what you were just saying there, about sort of like moving into hip hop culture and like modern hip hop culture, really sort of not, I mean, there's some pushback. Obviously, it's not just one trend, right? But a common
Hmm.
trend is sort of like increase in like how many drugs I can consume and how fucked up I am all the time. And then I
Hmm.
feel like having participated, in hip hop as a form of media that I've appreciated over the course of my life, I've definitely noticed sort of a trend. And at some point earlier in that trend, there was the unapologetic embracing of cannabis as sort of like an assertion, sort of like an anti-prohibitionist, anti-racist assertion of like, yeah, we're black, we're making money, and we're smoking this thing that you made illegal to try to criminalize us. Fuck you, smoke weed every day. Which, on some level, I see that being an incredibly positive step forward on some level, but then the evolution of that becomes lean and overdosing from Xanax and all the rest. So I had said something about like it got to the point where
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Now it's lean. So this was going to be my last question, but I'll kind of ask it now because I'm curious um, where you see the racist origins of cannabis prohibition continuing to influence cannabis culture in Black communities.
Oh, that's a good question right there. I see the racist origin of cannabis prohibition continuing to influence. Say the last word.
Continuing to
Continuing to.
influence cannabis culture in Black communities.
Well, I can talk about that, but that necessarily won't be from a hip hop standpoint because I can talk about it from a slightly different standpoint.
Yep.
Okay. So, um, I touched upon this at SPMC also, which was okay, 1937, Anslinger, all of that, cannabis, boom, the Negroes, the Mexicans, we're done with that. All right. Fast forward to now. It is constantly asked of me when I am, again, often one of the few Black people in a cannabis space, whether it's on the super corporate level or in the we're at a sesh and we're just chilling kind of level, where are all the Black people? And I thought about it for a while, and I had to draw partially on my experience. My life before being the Dank Duchess included going to people's homes who ended up being Congress people, not just state Congress people, but so that circle of what was called Black upper middle class, I'm used to being in that circle. And I have to tell you, there's a mentality of my son, my cousins, my brother, all these people have been affected by cannabis prohibition in some kind of way. So everyone knows someone that has been to jail for it, whatever. So the idea that right now it is okay really flares up two main feelings, which is, yeah, I don't really know about that. They just accepted us. So I'm not going to stir up the pot with getting involved with this whole with this whole cannabis thing. And the other thing is this mentality, which is justified, which is they criminalized us for this, and now white men want to make money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem, so that's definitely what's happened, which causes, I feel, which has causes less people of color to be involved in the cannabis industry that would be if they did not have this past stigma, and that comes in with other groups as well. Asians have their own reasons for not coming in, but it still comes down to respectability politics. In a lot of ways, it comes. Can we still hold our head up high? And there's not a lot of education I find within the Black and Brown communities so that people realize that this is a real thing and a real opportunity to get involved in. And above all, for me, is about health, and health will be impacted. So what I what I find is that by the exclusion and by the stigmatizing cannabis, there has been a reticence to embracing cannabis, and then however, the young boys and young girls are not having that same kind of feeling because you know what? Cannabis makes you feel good. And when you're a teenager and you're feeling rebellious and you realize that it makes you feel good and these grown-ups have been lying, this next generation of of young people, I'm sure you realize, have a much broader sense of what is acceptable. And that is great and revolutionary. But it often is without context. So problems with that is just like, they can't hold us down, so we're gonna do it all. Oh, I mean, I have to tell you that I made a prediction which kind of hurts my heart, but speaking about how you saw people like Snoop and the people in the 90s who like smoke weed every day. West Coast was really, really big on that, like you said, as a bit of like, we're not going to deal with your conformity. We're making money and we're still doing this.
Mm-hmm.
What happened in around the mid 2000s, which was awesome, but at the same time a little bit scary, was that young Black kids decided to follow a rock star lifestyle, which is great. I like that, like busting down the barriers. That is great. However, again, no context. So, what I have felt it might happen is that we're seeing a lot of young Black men, I don't know if you've seen recently, dying of overdoses of drugs that white boys been doing for a long time, but they know a little bit more about it. So, and there's more, in a way, support, not a supportive community like every white family is like, oh, we're all about the drugs, but there's understanding that there isn't. It's a very much, I feel that a lot of young Black boys and girls are coming into this, let's dye our hair, let's live more freely, but newer into the situation. And I don't think the average Black boy knows about Narcan. So you're doing all this lean, but you don't know that, like, if you have dye, there's something that can bring you back. But maybe within other social circles, that's much more available information. So I personally am open to this culture shift, this meld of, this is not what white people do. This is what we all kind of do. But without any educational context, I think there's going to be a problem. And with the whole doing it for the gram idea for the young people, it's going to be exacerbated more so than it would have been 30 years ago, because now we can show off to 1,000 people at one time. And it's like a network of showing off and one-upmanship. The problem is that with weed and mushrooms, well, you're going to fall asleep or going to have some kind of out there trip. With heroin and like a lot of these designer drugs, then you die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what you're pointing at there is specifically sort of like this intense cultural divide as to like where harm reduction education is being applied in cultural use.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about. That is exactly what I'm talking about. The idea that at festivals that, like, I mean, you can't say that festivals, the average, festivals have a whole tent where if you're dying, they're not going to give you any shit. They're going to save you because you're dying, this concept. However, the average, Latasha might be like, if my mama finds out, so we're not going to tell anybody, and oh, she's going to die. Oh, sorry. So there's a lack of understanding of what can be done and how best to address these substances. Because at the end of the day, we're not going to make kids not do this. It's not going to happen. So then it comes to a point of like, how do you do this fairly safely?
Mm-hmm. So what do you think? What do you think is the avenue of change there? If I'm understanding this correctly, or understanding your perspective, if it seems like the legacy of racist prohibitionist, like the racist prohibition around cannabis in Black communities has sort of manifested in this way that there's reticence to being like, oh yeah, we'll jump on board with what the white people are doing, because now all of a sudden, since they can make money, it's okay. So fuck them, we're just gonna like keep doing our thing. But in doing so, sort of preventing, like kind of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing, like preventing all this good stuff from coming in. What do you see? What do you see as like the avenue of positive change there, for people who are in Black communities in that cultural context?
I believe that it can be a multi-pronged approach. More than anything, I think it takes courage, and I think it takes people who are willing to stand there and take the brunt of the, how could you do this? And you're just a prominent Black person, but how could you have this mentality? I think what is necessary is a good showing, just like, when we all found out that, like, oh, everyone has a gay friend. It was just like, oh, well, the whole coming out of the green closet, I think that would be massive. I think if people realize how much of their friends are doing something in secret and all of that, and we put our minds together, I think that can change things in relatively short amount of time. But we're all afraid of the reprobation and the ostracizing of oneself out of our communities. And I do believe that that level of division is required in order to keep the movement from advancing. So if you keep people feeling like they are not going to have support when they're out there, and then people won't move outwardly of that. When we were at SPMC, we saw Chris talk about when he was talking to the Black ministers. And the truth of the matter is that the Black church is huge within the Black community. Some of us aren't Christians, but within the structure of a lot of the Black community in the United States, the church is like right there in the middle. And until the church endorses it, I'm going to tell you, there's going to be problems because the church family and the church solidarity is so strong that going against that is going against all that's known. And that's not how humans work. However, when people do strike out and do something different and truthfully are successful at it, then there becomes a tolerance toward it. Oh, a maybe. But until that really happens, and it really is going to be treading water or moving backwards, unfortunately, because there's just too much water under this bridge, and there's too many things folded within each other that many people, just the way our minds are set up, the way our society is set up, if it doesn't provide an easy answer right now, and you can see how you're cushioned, a lot of people are afraid. And so at the end of the day, it's always the young people who have less fear. So I feel like a lot of these activists that are coming up who are pushing things, there's this one guy, Treyas Jarrells, who's big on like football players and CBD. He's been pushing that for 5-6 years. It caused him some problems and everything, and he's pushing it anyway. Guess what? More people are getting on that bandwagon. So it does require that level of courage and willingness to stand up for what's right.
And I definitely see...
Sorry. This is right. So
I definitely see how like there's an understandable reservation, Black or not, to open up about substance use, and to do so in a way of being like, yes, and I believe that it's a healthy thing and that it can be healthy, because the tendency for humans to be crabs in a bucket, which is, one crab tries to crawl out, the other ones just tear them all down, which a friend of mine a long while back said that he likes that metaphor. If you flip it, he said it becomes, no one's free till we're all free. But the tendency for humans to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool.
That is a good perspective. Oh God.
So the tendency for humans to do this really causes us to hold each other back. And so kind of like being the outlier is asking a lot of sacrifice in oneself, at least initially, assuming that culture eventually catches up, like this CBD example. And I think in fact, this is going to be coming out before the end of February. And on February 20th is the the Thank You Plant Medicine movement. Which might be a great opportunity for, people of, all sort of like gender, racial demographic to, and class, economic demographic to open up about these things. And I think that would be incredibly positive. You're sort of like the one of many rather than like that one standout. Although there's something to be said, very, very, I think especially in the United States, although I don't live there, and I'm sort of inferring this based on other people's reportings and analysis of the culture out there. It's that me, as a young white man, saying, I take psychedelic drugs or I smoke cannabis and I'm comfortable and confident with that, is probably not going to be much of a problem. But if a young Black male does this, the chances of then now being flagged by the police as a potential drug dealer or having, the consequences are greater, because the amount of people that get arrested for, it's different now, but like the reports where the amount of people getting arrested for cannabis possession was about equal, I think, I can't remember the details, it was like Black to white is about equal, but Black people are 2/3 more likely to be to be charged and incarcerated for the same crime. And so I think maybe I'm just wondering too about like what your curiosities, what your thoughts are around how dangerous is that still from a legal institutional standpoint to come out and be confident about substance use as being a healthy thing or being an outlier moving towards greater harm reduction in your communities?
Oh, I mean, that is definitely super high of a concern. The actual statistic is that the usage between whites and blacks are about the same, but the incarceration rate is like way higher on blacks. So yeah, that is something to be aware of. That is definitely a concern because I recognize that even though I'm black, I'm a woman,
Mm-hmm.
which gives me just a little bit more leeway on the racist trope, of situation. But being a black man saying that like I support cannabis and I support psychedelics and such like that, yeah, that definitely puts a much more of a target on his back on what his doings are and such like that. And the narrative that is around what he's doing and what you would be doing would be very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do within our media and within our society still have very many prejudicial overtones, which makes problems. I mean, at the end, it comes down to people's psychology. And when you have these layers that need to be pulled back, no matter what, this guy who's standing up and saying, I am doing this, he's also saying, and in me doing this, I am putting my family, my business, my relationship with my neighborhood, all of that at risk. So it is asking for a lot. And it's still necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. I don't see how it could really be any different than people en masse. And I think that thank you for reminding me about 220, because I think that will change a lot. If en masse we all just said thank you, plant medicine, then it's like, oh, Johnny and Dre, oh, okay, great. And I think that little bit of encouragement will help. And as the ball rolls, more people will open their mouth. It's right now at the beginning. That's really what it is. It's just at the beginning, but I don't think it's stopping anytime soon. And I realize with life that I'm patient.